It's been 40 years since Fender introduced the Squier range of the Fender family, and last week they released the 40th anniversary commemorative guitars and basses. I did a quick video looking at the guitars, and now I'm going to take a look at the basses. So they've got 4 different basses in the lineup. There are 2 P basses and 2 jazz basses, and they've divided this 40th anniversary series up in the guitar and in the bass range into a vintage model and a gold model. And so I thought what would be kind of interesting, and what I did with the guitar video, is just to kind of compare these with their closest Squier counterpart that's already available. Both of those I think are going to be, with the guitars and the basses, the closest counterpart to these anniversaries is going to be in the classic vibe range of the Squier lineup, to see exactly what we're getting. These are, of course, they're commemorative anniversary models, and some people are going to want them just because of that, and they're cool. But just as a player instrument, what are you getting that would be different or maybe better than the standard classic vibe range, which is already available? Because these are more expensive. First off, if we look at the price difference in it, I've got the jazz bass version pulled up here. On the left here, I'm looking at the classic vibe 70s jazz bass, and on the right, the 40th anniversary gold edition jazz bass. I think these are the 2 that are most similar. And first off, you see a fairly significant difference in the price. It's $110. So what are we getting for the difference in that $110 price, and what are we getting in this 40th anniversary edition? One other thing too, these are not available to purchase yet. None of the dealers have got them. It's my understanding from speaking to some of the retailers that it's going to be early March. They have estimated to get these, to have them available to ship. So we're still about a month out. So all we can really do is just take a look at them online right now. So first thing, the color range. If we look at the classic vibe that's available now, we can get that in 3 different colors. There's a sunburst model. These all have a maple fretboard with the black binding and blocks. Got a black model and a natural model. That's very 70s looking. This natural, just to be specific here, is not actually ash wood, which is what it would have been on a true 70s bass, I think. Just going down and looking, that's actually soft maple, but very nice looking instrument. In the new gold edition of the anniversary line, this is also blocked and bound, which looks great. This is a rosewood style fretboard, although it isn't rosewood, but it has the mother of pearl colored inlays. Also, clearly they're going for a 70s jazz bass style look with this, and they're offering this to us in 2 different colors. This Olympic white, which really is more of their vintage white color. This is not really, when I think of Olympic white, I think of a brighter white. This is kind of what Olympic white would look like after the nitrocellulose lacquer clear coat had yellowed some over time. So this is kind of a aged Olympic white, maybe. And we can also get it in this very interesting and cool ruby red metallic color, which I do think is probably hard to photograph. This is a very, very dark pearl blood colored red, which is quite striking with this anodized gold aluminum pickguard. And you can see this also has gold hardware, including gold screws in the pickups, gold bridge, gold control plate, gold tuners. Very pretty bass, very interesting. So I'm going to go back and just look at compare the specs on these 2 instruments. What are we getting different with this gold edition for $110? We are getting the gold hardware and the anodized gold pickguard, so that's clearly part of the cost. Let's see what else. What else are they doing for us? So I'm just going to click on the specs here on both these instruments. I'm going to go back and pull up on the classic 70s vibe. I want to look at the black one, which I think is going to be closest to these 2 finished models, the Olympic white and this ruby color that they're offered in the 40th anniversary. So the first thing to note about this is the body wood. On the classic vibe, in the opaque finishes, this is being offered in poplar. Again, in the natural finish, it's a soft maple. The 40th anniversary, the guitars are the same way that I looked at, but it's the bodywood they're using is Naito, an easily renewable wood that is probably certainly cheaper for the manufacturers to use than alder and ash, certainly ash. And probably we'll start seeing that on more inexpensive guitars. These are both gloss polyurethane finishes. They're both listed as Fender designed Alnico single coils. If you look at the ad copy on the anniversary model, they do have it listed as an Alnico 5 magnet. I'll bet these are both Alnico 5s. I bet these are the same pickups. Vintage style bridges and tuners. The classic vibe, the hardware is listed as nickel finish. And on the 40th anniversary, of course, it's this gold-plated finish. So those are the real differences. There's also the 40th anniversary. I don't know if it'll show up in the photo. You can see a little bit here in this photo, but it has a commemorative neck plate on the back of the neck. So that's kind of cool. So we're getting the commemorative neck plate. We're getting some different finishes, and the neck on the 40th anniversary. We'll see the fingerboard is actually Indian laurel. They do have a bone nut. This is both models, which is nice. So pretty cool. I like both the colors. I think they both look really nice. They offer this in a vintage style too, and I'm going to take a look at the vintage spec bass, but we're going to look at the P bass for that, and I'm going to flip on over to that now. This is the 40th anniversary P bass that they're doing, and this is the vintage version. Now they offer a gold version too that has blocks and binding and gold hardware, and it's spec'd out like the jazz bass that we just looked at. And I think the closest Squier in the current lineup that matches up with this would be the 60s Precision. They don't have a 50s version that they're offering now, but these are similar. And the 60s is available in 2 colors. They have Olympic white. Now this is actually a lot closer to Olympic white, true Olympic white, than we saw with the jazz bass, the 40th jazz bass. You can see how much whiter, more pearl colored this is. This is closer to true vintage white. Again, vintage white, this is what it would have looked like new in the 1960s, let's say, when the color was originally offered. Over time, those instruments were finished with nitrocellulose lacquer, and the lacquer clear coat would age and turn yellow, and it really changed the colors on a lot of those basses, or guitars and basses from that period. Olympic white was one. It would turn it more of the cream, buttercream color from this more pearl white color that it started out as. So if we look at the specs on this, I think this is kind of funny. They mentioned this is 100% designed by Fender. Who else would have designed these? If we look at the specs, there are a couple of interesting features with this. One thing, we're getting the gold anodized pickguard. If we look at the 60s classic vibe, this is a torque pickguard, which would be characteristic of a 60s bass. This is spec'd out more like a late 50s bass. So the pickguards are different. Now on the classic vibe, if we look at the specs on these, we can tell on the 40th anniversary vintage we're getting a maple fretboard. There's no question about that. But you can see that here, and it's also a tinted satin urethane finish. So it's a tinted. It's going to have a nice sort of yellowed color to it, which matches up nicely with this sort of buttercream vintage white, some satin vintage blonde finish. But all these basses and the guitars too are all using these narrow, tall frets, which is what Fender's using in the I think the current American Professional 2s. I think that the outgoing American Original line, which I understand, all the talk is that line is being canceled. Hopefully they're going to give us a good replacement. That's sort of the real sweet spot of the American Fender lineup, is the vintage versions that they've done over the years. This is a Fender design Alnico split coil on both of these, and again I suspect these are the same pickup, in the classic vibe and in this anniversary edition. So, and again on the anniversary we get a commemorative back plate. One of the things that's actually quite different about these, and we've got the Naito body on the anniversary edition, and poplar again on the classic vibe. The classic vibe and the gold versions of these also are all gloss finishes. the vintage versions of these 40th anniversaries are actually satin. This is a satin urethane finish. So do you like the satin finishes? Do you not? I don't know. I actually prefer the gloss finishes on all these, but some people I know like the satin finishes. So it's a matter of personal taste. If you do have a satin finish and you play it enough, it tends to gloss itself out anyway in the areas where you're putting a lot of wear on the instrument. Again, maple fretboard on this one. These both have what Fender are calling these the vintage style tuners. One of the things that's unique about the vintage version of all these instruments, the guitars and the basses, if we look at the hardware, they're listing this hardware as aged chrome. So on the left here, I've got the Classic Vibe pulled up, and this is a chrome finish and very bright and obviously brand new. If we look at the finish, this is the gold, I'm sorry, the 40th anniversary vintage edition on the right, the P-Bass. And this hardware does look aged. It does not look brand new. It looks, I don't know, patinaed, I guess is the way to say it. The patina or aged hardware, it seems to work better when the guitar also has some aging, like you would see on the custom shop relics. Where the hardware matches the aging of the guitar. But the finishes on these anniversary editions, they're satin, but they're otherwise brand new. So I don't know, do you like that? Do you not like it? Just another interesting characteristic of these. The Squiers have been around since 1982, and the Squier guitars, but Fender's actually owned the Squier name since the 1960s. And before that, Squier was a separate company, and they produced strings for Fender and some other companies too. But in the 1960s, Fender acquired Squier, and they instead of calling they were still using the strings, but they just started making them under the Fender name instead of the Squier name, and they kind of retired the Squier name until 1982. And Fender needed to start competing in some way. They were making some instruments. They made the Lead series and the Bullet series. These were American guitars in the early 1980s to try to compete with some of the imports that were available at the time, especially some of the Japanese imports. But Fender decided that it needed to do an import line to keep up with some of these other competing import instruments. So rather than trying to come up with a new name and get all that sorted out, they just decided to use the Squier name that they already had and build the instruments under that. So the first Squiers were actually Japanese guitars. And actually, when Fender sold to the employees in 1985, the employees got the intellectual property for Fender, but they didn't get any tools or parts or a manufacturing facility or anything. It took them a year. The old factory was in Fullerton, California. It took them a year to find a place to build things in Corona. And for the entire year of 1985, really anything made by Fender was made in Fender Japan. So they didn't really start making American Fenders again until 1986. But the first Squiers came out in 82, and all the 80 Squiers were made in Japan. I actually got my first Squier in 1986, and it was a Squier jazz bass, and a Japanese-made jazz bass, black with a white pick guard. And I still have the receipt for that bass, and it was $460. And and this is 1986, May of 1986. According to one of these the various inflation calculators that you can find online, adjusted for inflation, that's $1,170 today. So these current Squiers are $600, and I know some of the people are going to be a little bit concerned about $600 Squiers, but you think about the 80s Japanese Squiers, $1,200 almost. I don't know, $600, is that a bad price? Now, I know it costs as much to make stuff in Japan today as it does in America, but at that time, things can be manufactured rather cheaply in Japan. So $1,170, I don't know, $600 is maybe not that bad a deal. $110 more than the classic Vibes. You do get some different features, especially the gold edition. It's the same price, whether you buy the vintage or the gold edition of this 40th anniversary. You're paying the same price. The gold edition adds some more features. You do get the gold hardware, and you get the blocks and binding. As far as the price increase, this $110, it's a little harder to see how that, what you're getting, what value you're getting for your money with this vintage edition. But I mean, it's not that much money. It's cool to have the anniversary edition is kind of cool to have, and this vintage edition looks nice. I really like this P-Bass. And also available in this satin Dakota Red, which is, I think that's gorgeous. I love Dakota red, and it's a fairly rare original color. You don't see a lot of Dakota red original 1960s Fenders. So that looks really, really nice. So both these are cool. And again, they've got a jazz-based version of this also, which we'll pull that up for just a minute here. We can get some good colors with that too. This satin seafoam green. This is an odd sunburst. I looked at the Stratocaster in the 40th anniversary guitars, and this is to me a very unusual two-tone sunburst. This also has a black anodized pick guard, anodized aluminum pick guard. So, you know, do you like this sunburst? I don't know. When I think of two-tone sunburst, it's not exactly what I'm thinking about. But again, I'm not used to looking at it. You know, maybe after I've seen it for a while. So. Yeah, those are the 40th anniversary basses. Sometime in March, we should be getting these. Who's going to buy one of these? Or a couple of them for $600. You know, I think they're cool. Some really nice colors. You know, this satin seafoam green sure looks nice. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope some of this stuff's helpful or interesting, and I'll see you next time.